humans themselves become a commodity. So now the way I view others is changed. Right? I mean, just think of how rife our culture is of this. You know, just the greatest example is the abundance of pornography, right? So that now someone's body becomes a commodity that can be bought and sold, right? And I can have, I can look through them and have different ones, right? I get to choose what pleasures me, what appeals to me. So eros becomes base. Eros brings us, simply seen as sex. It's brought down. As opposed to a search for happiness, it becomes a search for an experience, a search for pleasure. That's all eros becomes. It doesn't become a search for my happiness. Now, ultimately, it is, we are searching for happiness, but we totally have a really low, bad standard for happiness. So humans become a commodity. Look at their treatment, going to abortion, right? There would be another one, right? Where humans would become a commodity. When the search for pleasure becomes obsessive, it holds us in thrall and keeps us from experiencing other satisfaction. This is from Pope Francis's newest apostolic exhortation, Amoris Laetitia. So the joy of love. So it becomes, when pleasure becomes obsessive, it holds us in thrall and keeps us from experiencing other satisfaction. So now, the way we view humans, the way we view humanity, is through pleasure. Is through pleasure. We can't see it in any other way. And often the reason that the media, at least in my opinion, the reason that the media goes so hard after the priests who have abused sexually, and it's a bad thing. There shouldn't be any priests who abuse, right? But if you actually look at the statistics, it's a lower percentage than males in society who abuse minors. And the reason they do that is because underlying this, there's this idea that celibacy is not good. That repressing your sexual desires is not a good thing, and it's going to come out in some way. And so it comes out in abusing children, right? In sexual abuse. Whereas actually, the media's not smart. They're not good at research. And if they actually did their research and understood, they would understand that pedophilia is actually a deep psychological issue that cannot be cured. So it's not just a matter of repressing any feelings or sexual desires. It's actually a deep psychological issue that can never fully be resolved. But that's how the world is viewed. That's how the world is viewed. And agape. So God's love for us, in modern love, simply becomes a matter of personal choice. So religion, what God has done for us, is a matter of personal choice. As opposed to starting with God and saying, He has offered us salvation, He has shown us His love, and we must love Him back and come to love Him as God. Now we just say it's a matter of personal choice. It's what you choose. That's all that matters. So agape becomes obsolete. It, again, goes to the realm of what is personally true for you. What is your personal love? Some of you may recognize this. This is a speech that John F. Kennedy gave. It's a very famous speech. He was taking criticism for being Catholic. And running for president. There was the fear that he was going to become, the Vatican's president, right? There's this idea. And here's what he says. I am not the Catholic candidate for president. I am the Democratic Party's candidate for president, who happens to also be Catholic. I do not speak for my church on public matters, and the church does not speak for me. whatever issue may come before me as a president on birth control, divorce, censorship, gambling, or any other subject, I will make my decision in accordance with what my conscience tells me to be the national interest, and without regard to outside religious pressures or dictates. He separates and relegates, unfortunately, religion to personal choice. So that, where is it? Who happens to also be Catholic. It's just a choice I make. No, I'm Catholic, and from there comes my desire to love, comes my desire to serve, comes my desire to show you what it is to be loved by God. That's in many ways, that's what the saints would say, right? I am Catholic, and from that comes my love. Whereas, Kennedy says, I happen to also be a Catholic. Just like I happen to also be athletic, or I happen to also play chess, or I happen to also, I understand it's in some ways criticism may be overly harsh, but he relegates it to that. He says it's just a personal choice. It doesn't necessarily transform my whole life. I will make decisions in accord with what my own conscience tells me to be the national interest, and without regard to religious pressures or dictates. What's interesting about this is fascinating. What becomes the arbiter, or what becomes the formation of his conscience? The country. The country, without regard for outside religious pressures. So now, the national interest becomes more important than God, more important than religion. And this isn't just, Kennedy's just a depiction of this, right? This has always been the struggle between politics and God. Who's got what? This is the question of Henry VIII, right? This is always the struggle between politics and God and the church. So I'm just using this as a personification of it. So now that I form my conscience and I serve my country, right? That becomes in many ways God, and then I'll follow my faith. Whereas for us, we say, no, we love first. We have charity first. And then that leads us to serve our country. That leads us to love our country. That leads us to love one another. We can start with love of our country, but interestingly enough, and I can say I've had a profound shift in how I've viewed politics. I used to be very involved. And now I say I take a disinterested interest in that, yes, I'm interested because politics impacts millions of people. So yes, as Christians, as Catholics, we are called to be interested in the polity, in what's going on. But at the same time, it's not the be-all and end-all. There's another good, and should a candidate be elected who is not necessarily within my keeping, or someone who's in line with my faith views, well, that's okay. That's okay. I need to continue to show the world love. I need to continue to show the world charity. I need to continue to show the world hope, faith, right? That's my task. So a disinterested interest in politics. And you become to truly love your country. I'm forgetting the term, but there's like, you can have a fascination with your country, or a vision of your country for what you want it to be, as opposed to loving it for what it is, right? And its brokenness. And in that way, you can begin then to see the goodness and the badness, right? So you can begin to then influence and see, what does my country need? As opposed to having this ideal, right? This ideal that I want my country to be. I just say, no, here are the good things, here are the bad things. I'm a Catholic first, and let's change the bad things and make better the good things. So some of these consequences of love, of this modern love, which is based in in pituity, it's based in motion. Some of our is based simply in pleasure, in sex. Love. So eros is sex and pleasure. Happiness is there for the purchasing. I can purchase my happiness. Happiness is out there to be bought, whether it's a new house, a new car, whatever. Happiness is out there to be bought. Amoris Laetitia again, from Pope Francis. In a consumerist society, everything is there to be purchased, possessed, or consumed, including people. A similar sentiment to what Benedict was saying before, in that we become commodities, right? We become commodities, and Francis is challenging us in our consumerism to look at ourselves and say, how can we change this idea? We don't just consume people, right? We love them. And how can I change that about my own life? So there's some challenging, from what I've read of it, there's some good challenging pieces in there. Bodily objects. Deus Caritas Est again. We now consider our body and sexuality as the purely material part of ourselves to be used and exploited at will. So this is what I was talking about before, when we are composite of body and soul. And so we need to treat our bodies well, and obviously our souls. Our society says that our body is merely an instrument for our sexuality and our pleasure, so I can use it in any way I want. Ultimately, myself is not my body. Myself is my mind, or myself is my soul, or whatever. We're not necessarily that reflective on it, but it just ultimately comes down to my mind, right, and what I think and what I experience and what I feel, because in many ways it's all chemically wrapped up, right? And so it can be exploited. So I can do anything I want, right? And this comes down to I didn't realize this, I was at a restaurant on Brady Street, and there was, and I never knew these existed, there was an STD clinic there. Kind of an appropriate place to have it, I guess, on Brady Street. But the point is that, right, our body, everyone, if you're, I shouldn't say not everyone, but if you're in the medical field, we know that having tons of partners is not healthy for you. It's bad for your health. And so, in a place where this particularly happens often, we have an STD clinic where you can get free, STD testing, right? Because our body is just used for our pleasure. It's a commodity, right? It can be bought and it can be sold. The hockey team I'm on, there's some unsavory people. Well, I shouldn't say unsavory. They're good. They're good guys at the end of the day, and the idea is to try and bring them around. But they, they'll go to strip clubs and all those types of things. And one of them said once, well, if they're working their way through college, doing that, I don't have a problem with it. And I said, well, I do, because our bodies are not just a commodity, right? But that's how people view it. If you can make money doing that, that's okay. That's good. And I mean, they know where I stand on this. So if it makes it onto the internet and they see it, they won't be angry with me. Hopefully the Archbishop doesn't see it though. But the point is that it's a commodity, right? It becomes merely a commodity. So if you can make money for that, good for you. Nice job. As opposed to saying, no, we have bodies that need to be respected and loved. And unfortunately, I don't know if there's any, that's just a horrible life in general. Strip clubs, and it's full of drugs and all that stuff, unsavory stuff. But here's another example, right? Caitlyn Jenner, right? You can become what you want to be. Our bodies are merely a material part of ourselves that can be changed, that can be transformed to how I feel. And then if I want to change it the next day, I can do the same. Just recently, there was a whole number of doctors who essentially signed an article stating that this is not a good thing. There's actually a deep psychological issues going on here, and that if we're looking at, you know, people who have gender changes, it's not pretty. It's not pretty with regard to all of the depression and the suicides to those who have had sex changes. It's through the roof, right? It's through the roof. So this is not actually a healthy thing. A whole number of doctors just signed this document to kind of say, no, wait a minute, this isn't necessarily a good thing to be encouraged, right? But our bodies, if this is the case, then why not this, right? If our bodies are just material things, they can be changed at our whim if we have, and we do have, the technology to do it. You know, the sexual revolution, right? I was just talking about that. You know, the sexual revolution. Go out and have fun as much as you want, regardless of how it affects your health. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is personal. There's no real objective standard of beauty. People will recognize an objective standard of beauty. And it's hard to actually come up with an objective standard of beauty, right? But the point is that beauty is just personal. Beauty is just ourselves. Morris Letizia again. The love of friendship is called charity when it perceives and esteems the great worth of another person. Beauty, that great worth, which is other than physical or psychological appeal, enables us to appreciate the sacredness of a person. So we can't see, we lose when humans merely become a physical or psychological attraction or appeal. We lose beauty. We lose the true beauty of the human person, right? And we've done that in many ways. Okay, another little video, how the blind see beauty. It's kind of an interesting little video.
When I close my eyes, I see a gentle light. I have no concept of the color. I just want to state I have no sight. So beauty for me now means real simple things. I mean just the simple things. Just opening my eyes in the morning and listening to the birds outside my window chirping. I mean, it's a feeling that I'm alive.
To me, beauty is character, personality, the way people carry themselves. Basically, it's just the way the person is, you know. And some people could be very pretty and beautiful inside just by the way they carry themselves or help or are concerned about my situation and stuff.
I think beauty is experience. So an experience, I mean by that is, you know, the smell of warm baked cookies, the warm breeze against your skin, the feel of grass underneath your feet when you're, you know, walking in the front yard.
Going to the beach and sitting by the shore, to me, is beauty. And just imagining what the ocean looked like right now and what the sky looked like, that's beauty for me. At times it can be overwhelming because when you're blind, your life consists of nothing but feelings. Every day is a feeling.
I feel that losing my sight has been a blessing, which means I don't care what nationality somebody is, I don't care how tall somebody is, I don't care how big or small they are. A person is beautiful because they are true to themselves.
I have 3 babies, 12 and 9, and my daughter just turned 3. And to me, they're all beautiful, and I don't even know what they look like. They're beautiful inside. They're me, you know. They're me.
Beauty for me is calm. Beauty for me is peace.
I don't really need my eyes to enjoy beauty. That's beauty for me.
But it's also people being and doing what is right and what is good and caring about each other. Beauty is an experience of living and, you know, finding joy. I feel like joy is the most beautiful thing in the world.
Okay. So one guy maybe said, well, beauty is an experience, right? And then he goes on to say that beauty is you don't care what nationality they are, which is good. He's kind of on the right track. And then he goes, as long as they're true to themselves. Gets back to self again, right? As long as we're true to ourself, to me, as opposed to, no, as long as they're true to God. Because that's where true beauty is, right? That's the beauty of the lives of the saints. So beauty, just as an experience. It can't be just as an experience. It's got to be something transcendent. It's got to be something beyond ourselves. The love, the beauty of love, the beauty of charity. Loving someone for who they are, right? Charity in omnibus, caritas in omnibus, charity in everything. So, for us, what do we do? The church is God's family in the world. In this family, no one ought to go without the necessities of life. Deus caritas est. Pope Benedict again. What do I do to alleviate hunger, poverty, homelessness? How do I prioritize my money, time, gifts, etc.? This is where the rubber hits the road. The church is God's family in the world. In this family, no one ought to go without the necessities of life. Love dictates that to us. Love tells us how to act. And so when we get away from charity, we get away from that. We become more selfish so that our money becomes used for us, our time becomes used for us, our gifts become used for us. Now, obviously, yes, we do need to be prudent and all that, but sometimes we use prudence as a crutch, right? We use prudence in many ways to make excuses for ourselves, so we can live more comfortably. We can we can be happier, right? We can purchase happiness, right? And so, really reflecting on that, how can we reprioritize? How can we use our time, our money, our gifts better in order to take better care of our fellow humans? And even this goes beyond just going on mission trips to other countries and things like that. What about education? Thinking of how wouldn't it be great if a parish like us, if we could have in many ways free education. Anyone who wanted to come here could. What an amazing idea, because education is a wonderful and good thing, and then educating others, right? Moving on, or just going to those other parts of the world where there is great poverty, where we do stretch ourselves, right? And we open our minds and our hearts to love. Much will be required of the person entrusted with much, and still more will be demanded of the person entrusted with more. For myself, this is one of the most daunting passages in sacred scripture. As a country, we have been entrusted with much, still more. So how much will be demanded of us at our judgment when we appear before the Lord? Why and what do we allow our children to do things, and for what reason? I was in the 8th grade teaching, and someone asked a question. They said, what is the church's stance on dating? And I was like, well, it's allowed. I think all your parents dated at some point. But then I got into the real question. Then I got into the real question of what they were trying to get at. They said, is it okay to date now? And I said, well, there's nothing against it. Well, why are you dating, right? Why are our kids doing certain things, and what are they doing? I said, are you just dating a certain person because they're really pretty, and putting them on Snapchat, having a picture of them on Snapchat or on Instagram or Pinterest or whatever, is good for your social status and social standing? Because that's, you know, what, that, I'll be honest, I mean, that's what guys do in a lot of ways, right? You know, she looks good, and it makes me look good. It makes me feel good about myself. Or, you know, if you're a female, he's a really popular guy, and it will increase my social status, my social standing. You know, so kind of once we got into it, it was like, well, why are you doing this, right? Is there a better reason? Is the reason because that person, one of the 8th graders was saying that, well, it's not going to end up in marriage. I said, you're probably right. You know, I mean, you're probably right. So yes, in some ways, why are you dating? But, you know, the point is, do it if you're going to, you know, have some type of relationship or friendship, do it to make each other better, right? Do it to bring each other closer to God. Don't just do it arbitrarily because it makes you feel good, because it increases your social standing. So being, you know, forcing our children to be intentional as opposed to what is just cool for me. Forcing our kids to be intentional so that they think through what they're doing. Why am I doing this? The sanctifying reality of familial love. In a world where the name of God is sometimes associated with vengeance or even a duty of hatred and violence, this message, God is love, is both timely and significant. So in a time where God isn't often associated with love, the way to restore that love is through familial love. One of the things that I tell, again, my wedding couples is when I ask them about what is love, and then at some point I point to the cross and I say, that's love. That's the reality of love. That's sacrifice. And the way to bring the world to true love is through familial love. It's through the love of the spouses that spread to children. Right? That's how to restore true love. True charity is, as I said, that eventually, God willing, when you come to grow and grow as a couple more and more in love, you begin to love that person for who they are. And I can tell you that now, seeing that in my parents, I really appreciate that. Now I'm the one that's trying to change them, you know, and it really doesn't work. But that's the reality, is that love in the family leading to God will bring about a transformation in the world. Being Christian is not the result of an ethical choice or a lofty idea. This actually gets to some of the point that actually Francis is making in Amoris Laetitia. But the encounter with an event, a person, which gives life a new horizon and a decisive direction. So life, love of God, charity gives us a decisive direction. It points us to heaven. It points us to the Father. It points us to Christ. It points us to the Holy Spirit. And it's not just this idea. It's an encounter with a person who we can love for their own sake. We've been given the gift of charity. So it's an encounter with a person. That's the greatest reality of our faith, is that the reason the sacraments are to encounter a person. They're to encounter God. They're a path for us. One of the things that we stress as Catholics is this is the path. But you can follow this path and do everything externally, but that doesn't assure your salvation. If you're not transformed, it's not just a mere formula that brings you to heaven. I can show you the path. I can try and guide you along that path. But it's no guarantee if we are not transformed. If we do not encounter this person, if we do not love this person, if our life is not set in another direction. Mahatma Gandhi famously said that if every Christian truly lived out the reality of what they're called to do, that he would become a Christian and that the whole world would be Christian. The whole world would be Catholic. If we truly lived out what we were called to do, the whole world would be able to see the love that is present in us, to see the goodness, and they would want it. They would say, that's beauty, that's truth, that's love, without a doubt. And so we have to recover that in the family. Choosing sanctity, right? That's our life choice. To choose to be a saint. You know, my parents were very strict growing up, and we would go to daily mass. And there were 6 kids in the family. That was tough, you know. And again, I know I've said this before, but the criticism people would say to my parents, well, you know, aren't you going to force it upon your kids? And their response always was, well, at least they'll know what they're leaving, right? At least they'll know what they're leaving. So choosing sanctity, holding that up as a model for our children, allowing them to know the lives of the saints. I remember as a little kid, you know, before I received First Communion, I would have the book or the bag full of saints books, you know, little children's saints books with pictures in it. And we'd read it, you know, during Mass in order to be quiet, right? Because that's what you wanted to do. That's who you wanted, who my parents wanted to be shown, me to be shown, my siblings as well, as role models, as instances of charity, of people willing to leave behind themselves and to serve the Lord. So choosing sanctity. Christian marriage and the Christian family build up the church. For in the family, the human person is not only brought into being and progressively introduced by means of education into the human community, but by means of the rebirth of baptism and education in the faith, and education in the faith, the child is also introduced into God's family, which is the church. Familiaris Consortio, that is Saint Pope John Paul II's letter on encyclical on the family. So the family is the child's introduction into the church. The family is the child's introduction into love. That's the beauty of the family. And in order to restore true love, true charity, it begins at home. It begins at home. That's the importance of family living. And preaching that to the kids, the sanctity of life. That we're here for a purpose. The purpose is to know, love, and serve God. And so be happy with Him in the next. And it comes down to the reality that Christ is a person. God is love. And we need to encounter that love in this life. And we can encounter that love. We are able to. And we are called to. Most of us don't take the time to understand that or to try and do it. And yes, it does take time. It does take practice. It takes, you know, Mother Teresa didn't become a saint overnight, right? It actually wasn't until, you know, she was a nun for a while, and then she had a conversion experience, and it changed her life, right? And that sanctity is not something static. So I can't say, oh, I'm a saint now. I don't have to work at it anymore. If we're not working at it, we're falling backwards, right? Doesn't mean we can't restore our life, right, and work at it and start over again. That's the beauty of the sacrament of reconciliation, right? But if we're not going forward, we're falling backwards. It's just like lifting weights or running, right? If you don't run, you will not be able to run more, right? It just doesn't happen. There's no way to do it, right? It just doesn't work. It's the same with our faith. It's the same with our faith. So preaching sanctity always and everywhere. So thank you guys. I have a few minutes left for questions if you'd like. Or did I talk you all to death again?
I have questions. It's just, I think you talked about this before in a previous talk, but you know, I mean, I believe everything. I'm not debating anything. But I know, I just feel like, you know, a lot of the children,
Mhm.
even influencing your friends, because our culture tells us to do what makes us feel good, what's best for us, what our needs are. We have all the freedom with, changing partners and all kinds of birth control and money and that. And when I can feel that from some people that I work with, when I talk about, like, don't live together before marriage, or I don't think birth control is good. They'll say, where are you from? What planet are you on? It does. You realize how difficult it is sometimes to stand up for your faith, because it's very countercultural.
It is countercultural, and what's so important about the family is that it forms culture, right? Family is the basis for culture. So in a family, you want to create little cultures of Catholicism, which then of love, and that's the idea of you want to create those cultures, and then those cultures, and that's why the community is also so important, right? Of families. So then the community of families comes together and creates a broader culture, and then that reaches out to the community of the city, right? The community of Brookfield, and so on and so forth. But we need to recover and restore, if you will, the love of the family. What family is all about. Family is all about, in our church, leading one another to heaven, leading the spouses to Christ. And so sharing that love with one another, and then also offering that love to children, and then creating that culture and continuing to allow it to grow. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys. Have a good evening.